Help yourself here. Resist on your own. What's up guys, Ben Brewster here with triathletics.com, and today in this article and three-part video series we're going to be talking about three different ways that I use J-bands. I've been using J-bands as part of my warm-up for about the last 10 to 12 years, really since I started training. Obviously they've acquired a great deal of popularity as far as how they're typically used in a warm-up, kind of a rapid-fire dynamic warm-up where you're just going through getting the muscles warm in a variety of different positions. I think they're great for that purpose, but again, a few different ways that I've begun to use them to get a little bit more out of them. So the first way that we're going to talk about in this video is overloaded eccentrics. To talk about eccentrics, I'll first want to review the difference between an eccentric, isometric, and concentric contraction. So if we're looking at a standard band external rotation, where we're resisting the band and going into external, the positive phase of the movement is the concentric contraction. That goes for a push-up, that goes for a bicep curl, that goes for a lat pull-down. The positive phase of the movement is considered a concentric contraction, where the actin myosin filaments, the fundamental contractile elements of the muscle, are coming together as you shorten the muscle. And the isometric contraction, that would be any contraction where you're holding statically and there's fundamentally no movement happening at the filaments. And then the eccentric contraction would be the negative phase of the movement. So that would be, I have a ton of resistance on the band and I'm resisting it as it lowers me back down. So why is that important, and why are overloaded eccentrics important? It requires really understanding the concept of the strength curve. And the strength curve is basically how hard your muscle is working at each specific angle and position along a specific movement. So essentially, if I'm going through, let's say, a diagonal raise, and I'm doing a concentric contraction, that resistance might be extremely hard at the very end range, but not too hard at the beginning of the range. And then on the negative, on the eccentric, it might be extremely easy because again, we are actually 25 to 50% stronger on the eccentric portion of a movement than on the concentric. And we intuitively know this, right? If you're on the positive phase of a squat, you might be able to do 225 pounds, but if you load it up 315 pounds, you might not be able to squat it up, but you'd definitely be able to slowly lower it on the way down. So we are stronger on the eccentric portion of the movement. And what this means is if you're only ever training with a weight that you could do for the concentric, you're never really overloading the eccentric portion of the movement. This is important because eccentric training has been shown to increase hypertrophy, increase muscle size more than just concentric training. It's also been shown to, in sprinters and hamstring strains, bulletproof against injury. So actually reducing the incidence of muscle strains by strengthening the brakes, strengthening the decelerators, strengthening that negative portion of the movement as opposed to just the concentric portion. So we're going to talk about eccentric overloading, and there's two main ways that I like to do it with the J-bands. The first is eccentric only, and the second is an assisted concentric. So eccentric only, we're going to cover that first. And I'm going to show you four basic movements. I don't really think you need to make it much more complicated than these four. The first one is an external rotation. The second one is a T. The third is a Y. And then the fourth is a reverse throwing pattern. Okay, so for the eccentric only option here, we're going to get no resistance on the band. We're just going to position ourselves in a good starting position, shoulder at 90 degrees, maximally externally rotate, good rib position. Okay, there's no resistance on the band. We're going to back up until we get enough resistance that it starts pulling us into internal rotation, and we're going to resist that. So that's overloading the eccentric portion of the movement. Back up, get resistance, resist it down. Set the joint angle, back up, get resistance, resist it down. Okay, here's what that would look like on the T. Get that specific position, not from the shoulder hyperextending, but from the scap retracting around the rib cage. Straight arm, thumb up, hold that, back up, resist it forward. Good T position, fully retracted, back up, resist it forward. On a Y, arm straight, thumb up, get to that good overhead position, scap posteriorly tilted, back up, control it down. Back up, eccentrically control it down. And then on a reverse throwing pattern, it would be much the same. Get to that end position, no resistance, back up, and control it down with the scap, controlling that scapula from posterior tilt all the way into anterior tilt into that follow through position. So that's the eccentric only version of the movement. That's one option, that's one way to overload that negative portion. The second way, it's a little bit counterintuitive, is a assisted concentric. So we're gonna basically go to a spot that we wouldn't normally be able to get the positive phase of the movement. So for the external rotation, right here might be a good spot normally. So I'm gonna back up to a position I wouldn't normally be able to get all the way back. From here, I'm gonna assist myself just enough to help me get to the end range, let go of the band, and resist it eccentrically to the starting position. So again, I'm helping myself get to full range concentrically, taking the hand off and lowering it. So as you can see, we are still getting everything out of the concentric because we're assisting ourselves, but now we're getting everything out of the eccentric too because we're using a heavier weight than we would otherwise be able to use. Now we're overloading both phases of the movement. That's how you maximize the strength curve. I'm just gonna show you real quick on the T's and Y's. So get out to a tough distance, help yourself with the end range, resist slow. Help yourself with the end range concentrically, no help on the eccentric. Y's, help yourself here, resist on your own. And reverse throwing pattern. So as you do these, you're gonna right away notice this is significantly harder than your regular J-band series. So that begs the question, what is the optimal application of overloading the eccentric of your J-bands? And my answer is it's not a good one to do pre-throwing as part of your regular J-band warm-up. My experience doing eccentrics actually does lead to a little bit more muscle soreness in your shoulder. So this is one that you're gonna wanna be a little careful with, not do it every single day, and kind of be careful and selective about when you do it. I would suggest 2 to 3 times a week and doing it post-throwing, as you're not gonna want to fatigue out the rotator cuff and scapular stabilizers directly before you throw. So be careful, be selective. Maybe you throw 2 bullpens a week, you do it post-bullpen, and you pick one other day during the week that you would do it. 2 to 3 sets, 8 to 10 reps, something in that range. But again, if you do give it a try, just make sure to avoid doing it directly pre-throwing when you're not trying to create too much fatigue and you're more trying to stimulate the muscles and encourage blood flow. So that's the first option, the first way that I've developed for incorporating a little bit more advanced J-band movements.